How many of y'all saw Cowspiracy? Awesome. You got to see that. How many of you have seen What the Health? All right, look at that, Eunice. All right. Our next speaker, Eunice Wong, was involved in both of those projects. She does a lot of other work too. Eunice is an actress, author, activist, and vegan supermom. I had Vegan Jedi on here somewhere also. She worked with the filmmakers in the groundbreaking documentary Cowspiracy, contributing to the companion book for that film, The Sustainability Secret. She worked with the same team again of filmmakers on the latest documentary, What the Health, that you all have seen. And I hope that you'll come back again tonight at what time? 7. We're going to screen it again tonight. Bring a friend and come back because Eunice is going to be there, and she'll hopefully do a Q&A and do some commentary. And I think you'll probably be blown away by some of the stories that she'll tell about all the research that went into that project and you know, all that was revealed. If you saw the film, it was amazing. She'll also be signing her book. Do we have your books? Did we get your books here?
They're downstairs.
Okay, and we're going to have those at the screening tonight too?
I think so.
Awesome. Of What the Health. All right, so I'm going to let you do yourself more justice than I just did.
Stay here and use this.
Are y'all cool if she stays there on her couch?
Do I have to?
On her couch. Yeah. Tap it. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Please help me
Hello.
welcome Eunice Wong.
Hi, good afternoon. I just want to clarify. I actually was not involved in making the films themselves. I wrote the books to both of them. So I went into, I'll talk about this later tonight, but I was not actually involved with the films. I just want that to be clear. When my husband and I, my husband sitting right here, went vegan, my first thought was, what about our kids? Because our children were then 3 and 6, and their favorite foods were mac and cheese, fish sticks, sausage pizza, hard-boiled eggs, chicken nuggets, chocolate milk. And when the pediatrician asked my son when he was like 3 what his favorite vegetable was, he said cheese. So I was like, okay. And one evening, soon after I became vegan, my 3-year-old daughter wanted pork dumplings. And I suggested vegetable ones. And she said, no, I want pork. And so this is a big dilemma for parents who are trying to transition their families to a vegan lifestyle. You obviously don't want deprivation to be associated with being vegan. But what a lot of adults forget is that most children instinctively understand that you do not hurt or kill other living beings if you do not need to. So I said to my daughter, very neutrally, very gently, I said, honey, do you know what is in a pork dumpling? They're made with dead pigs. And I could see her processing this, and after a very long pause, she said, okay, I'll try the vegetable dumplings. And that was, in fact, the last time she ever asked for any animal product. Joel Fuhrman, Dr. Joel Fuhrman, the doctor featured in Forks Over Knives, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen, says that in 25 years of medical practice, he has seen consistently that children are more willing to change dangerous habits than adults. And very few parents realize that what they feed their kids in the first 10 years of life may have the most impact on their lifelong health. In autopsies of accidental death victims, ages 3 to 26, they found the first indications of heart disease in almost every child by the age of 10. And obviously these were, animal product eating children. Hopefully also compassionate living is in line with what you've taught your children all their lives. To be kind, to think critically and not just blindly follow society's dictates, to be nonviolent, to be responsible and have empathy. All of these are foundations for social justice. So 1 year after the pork dumpling incident, my daughter's preschool teacher told me that one of the other kids in the class had brought in birthday cupcakes. And my daughter looked at the cupcakes and she said, are they vegan? They were not, and she would not eat one. She was 4. I almost fell over when her teacher told me. And I had never, ever, once, ever told either of the kids they couldn't eat a treat at school if it wasn't vegan, because I didn't want them to feel left out, I didn't want them to be ostracized, but she made the decision on her own. And the first thing we did after school that day was go out and get a chocolate vegan cupcake. A lot of people would accuse me of brainwashing my children, to which I would reply, yes, I am brainwashing them. Just as I am brainwashing them that people with dark skin are equal to people with light skin, and that women are equal to men, I am brainwashing them to refuse to collaborate in mass violence and environmental destruction, and to be ethical human beings. I also remember when my son asked me before we were vegan whether chicken was really like a dead chicken. And I went through these mental contortions, really uncomfortable, telling him, yes, we're eating a dead bird, but that's okay, everybody does it, but you should still be kind to animals, except for some animals like the one we're eating right now. And he was very, very confused. The only justification I could give him was that we needed to eat animals to be healthy. And of course, I was 110% wrong. Scientific literature shows that eating saturated fat, which is found mostly in animal products like meat, dairy, and eggs, is more closely associated with death than smoking cigarettes. So think about this. If you take your family to a neighborhood barbecue and the guy at the grill offers you and your child a cigarette and a light, what would you do? How would you react? And yet we accept, with thanks, the glistening beef burgers. What is the difference between taking the cigarette and taking the burger? Sure, the smell and the taste, but really the social habits, the lack of knowledge. People think that heart disease, cancer, and diabetes are inherited, not realizing that what they have actually inherited are the eating habits of their parents and grandparents, because no more than 10 to 20% of risk for the primary causes of death come from our genes. Even if you have a genetic predisposition, something almost always has to turn that gene on and set it into motion. And there is perhaps nothing more powerful to turn our genetics on and off than food. According to the World Health Organization, 80% of all heart disease, stroke, and diabetes can be prevented. The vast majority of the diseases are being created today by what people are eating in the West. So Americans eat an average per year of 270 pounds of meat, 34 pounds of cheese, and 32 pounds of eggs. And animal products are packed with carcinogens, cholesterol, saturated fat. They're packed with growth stimulants that can cause you to develop tumors, sex hormones that contribute to hormonally influenced diseases like breast, ovarian, prostate, and testicular cancers. They're filled with bioaccumulated toxins, inflammatory compounds, fecal contamination, 90%, 90, that's 10% away from 100%. 90% of the nation's retail chicken is contaminated with fecal matter. Salmonella, E. coli, the list goes on and on. So all of this puts the USDA in a very peculiar bind. The US Department of Agriculture is tasked with protecting the health of the public and releasing the dietary guidelines for Americans, which basically tells us what to eat to be healthy. Most people know this. What most people don't know is that the USDA also runs what are called check-off programs. These are federal advertising schemes for specific food industries like beef, dairy, eggs. You've all seen them. It's like milk, it does a body good, pork, the other white meat, the incredible edible egg. And these federally administered marketing programs also advertise for what they call industry trendsetters, like McDonald's and Domino's Pizza. So Wendy's Bacon Double Cheeseburger, for instance, is a government program. Because, see, the USDA has another mission besides protecting the health of the public, and that is to protect the profit margin of the producers of foods that, according to science, are killing us. So you see the conflict of interest. Unfortunately for the public, the animal agriculture industries spend at least $138 million a year. That's a big difference. But that's still a lot of money. $138 million a year lobbying Congress alone. And the government returns the favor. Every $1 industry contribution results in usually a $2,000 return as federal subsidy payments. And then the government also passes legislation like the Common Sense Consumption Act, which blocks lawsuits against any food manufacturer for any health problem that arises related to the long-term consumption of the food they produce. And then there's the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, which can convict as a terrorist, even if no violence is involved, anyone who damages the property or profit line of an animal business. And as the Center for Constitutional Rights stated, activists from any social movement can be prosecuted as terrorists if their advocacy, if their lawful protest affects the bottom line of a business. Will Potter in Herbivore magazine wrote that when you start altering your legal actions and scaling back your nonviolent activism because you are afraid of this legislation, then the law has already accomplished what its supporters intended. I haven't even talked about pharmaceuticals yet, so really quickly, 80% of this country's antibiotics are sold to go to livestock, to go into their feed. And this is so that the animals even have a remote chance of surviving the horrific conditions that they are raised in. These animals develop antibiotic resistance, which then spreads to humans, and which is now precipitating a global health crisis, which the WHO calls a post-antibiotic era, in which you could die from an infection if you scrape your knee or get strep throat because our antibiotics are failing. Animal ag, as we saw, is exchanging tons of cash in exchange for subsidies from the government, and the government is running these federal programs pushing Americans to eat more and more animal products. And people get sick from these foods requiring medication for the rest of their lives and expensive procedures, because our medical system is all about using drugs and surgeries to suppress symptoms. It is not about targeting and eliminating the cause of the disease itself, which in a vast majority of cases is the food that we eat. And so once people have these drugs and they have their surgeries, they think wrongly that they can safely continue to eat the food that made them sick in the first place. There's a joke in the pharmaceutical industry that there are two possible disasters when you're doing a clinical trial for a new drug. One is that you kill people. The second possible disaster is if you cure them, because in either case, they're not going to be buying your medication anymore. The American public and our illnesses have been turned into a money-making commodity, just as much as the pigs in their gestation crates, and the hens in their dairy cows, and the dairy cows in their systems of female reproductive slavery. Climate change has been huge in the news lately, and the animal agriculture industry is a leading cause, in fact, probably the leading cause of resource consumption, and plays a massive role in global warming. Raising animals for human food produces more greenhouse gases than all cars, trains, trucks, boats, and planes worldwide combined. Raising livestock consumes a third of the planet's freshwater resources. It's estimated that in 8 years, 2/3 of the global population will suffer from water shortages. John Robbins has a great analogy. He compares our peak water situation to driving a car with no fuel gauge. You just keep flooring the accelerator and the car zooms along and you think everything's fine because there's no warning, and then all of a sudden the car stops because you're out of gas. But the difference is if you're in a car and you run out of gas, you could get another ride, you could walk, you could hitchhike. If you're the human species and you've come to the bottom of your global freshwater tank, you have reached the end. Raising livestock occupies up to 45% of the Earth's land. Grazing animals and growing feed crops for them is responsible for up to 91% of Amazon rainforest destruction. And our rainforests act like a planetary thermostat. They're responsible for regulating weather patterns and global temperatures. The Amazon itself could be gone in the next 10 years. Every year, enough animal feces is produced in the US to cover every square foot of San Francisco, New York City, Tokyo, Berlin, Hong Kong, London, New Delhi, Rio de Janeiro, Delaware, Costa Rica, Bali, Denmark, and Asheville, North Carolina. Every square foot where you're sitting right now. And here in North Carolina, there are more factory farmed pigs than there are humans. And each one of those pigs produces 8 to 10 times more feces than an adult human. All of this raw, untreated sewage, along with the attendant herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, chemical fertilizers, residues of antibiotics, growth hormones, steroids, all of this sewage, this fecal chemical slurry, finds its way into the groundwater of the poor communities of color in which factory farms are disproportionately located, and then eventually into our lakes, into our streams, our rivers, and finally into our oceans, where it has created over 500 nitrogen-flooded dead zones that are completely devoid of life. In the parts of the ocean where there are still fish, industrial trawlers, these enormous trawlers with miles and miles of nets, literally scrape the bottoms of the oceans, scooping everything out. There is no regulation. And the largest consumer of fish on land is livestock. Pigs and chickens eat 6 times the amount of seafood that people in the United States do. Scientists predict that if we keep fishing the way we do, there will be fishless oceans by 2048. There's a plaque in Manhattan's American Museum of Natural History that reads, "Right now, we are in the midst of the 6th extinction, this time caused solely by humanity's transformation of the ecological landscape." A distinction is often made between ethical veganism for the animals and environmental veganism. I do not believe that distinction exists. Environmental veganism for the planet and future generations of all living creatures, that is ethical veganism. It is a moral commitment to refuse to be complicit in the destruction of our beautiful, beloved, ruined planet. There are credible scientists warning us that the Earth is rapidly coming to the end of its ability to sustain the human species. This is not hyperbole, and they are not talking about a distant future. Some of them are talking about a time span that a dog born today would live to see. And let me tell you, as a parent, as a human being who loves life, not just my life or the life of my children or my husband, life, the life force itself, I have no words for how much this terrifies me. We have a mean little individual in the White House, the most mocked man in the world right now, who recently made the United States, along with Nicaragua and Syria, the only countries in the world that are not a part of the Paris Climate Accord. All of this while miles and miles of Arctic ice sheets are collapsing into the ocean, the weather patterns grow more violent and erratic, and each successive year smashes the record for hottest year in history. Are you frightened? Are you frustrated? Because I know I am. You want direct action? Be vegan. This is the most direct action you can get, because you are responsible 365 days a year, 3 times a day, plus snacks, for making that decision. Don't stop calling Capitol Hill or going to protests, but eat vegan while you're doing it, just as Gary said. This is the greatest gift we can give our children. Every day, a person who is vegan will save 1,100 gallons of water, 45 pounds of grain, 30 square feet of forested land, 20 pounds CO2 equivalent, and 1 animal's life every single day. And if you already know what I'm talking about, as many of you do here, then I ask you, just as Gary did, please educate others. Live according to your values and show others that it is possible to do it. This is the foundation of social justice. And this is the only future we are going to have if we are going to have a future at all. I'm going to close with a short excerpt from my book, What the Health. You need to know that there are a couple references to people from earlier chapters. One is Jake Conroy. He was a political prisoner. He was indicted under the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act for running a legal website that damaged the properties of an animal testing laboratory. Another one is Renee Miller. She's an African-American woman who lives here in North Carolina, in Warsaw. She lives down the road from a factory farm. You also need to know that 40 years ago, George McGovern, who was the senator for South Dakota, introduced 40 years ago the first federal statement on the American diet, saying that the eating patterns of this century represent as critical a public health concern as any now before us. He urged all Americans to decrease consumption of animal products, and of course the animal agriculture industries went insane and basically forced his committee to rewrite the report. The whole story is in the book. As I get older, I see a lot of value in building strong communities around collective liberation. Jake Conroy said to Keegan and I, "It's not just about the animals, the environment, or human health. It's going to take all three. When you see how things intersect, that is when real change will start to happen. The power of the individual is giant. I don't think it can be overstated." I thought of George McGovern, struggling to present the truth to a society that wasn't ready to hear it. The animal agriculture industries mercilessly snuffed out, for the moment, his attempt to tell the truth, just as other powerful political forces snuffed out his attempts to bring justice to a war-ravaged nation. McGovern lived until he was 90. He celebrated his 88th birthday by skydiving. I guess he took his own dietary advice. In his 1972 acceptance address for the Democratic presidential nomination, he said, "And this is the time to stand for those things that are close to the American spirit. We are not content with things as they are. We reject the view of those who say, 'America, love it or leave it.' We reply, 'Let us change it so we may love it the more.' And this is the time." McGovern lost the presidency, of course, to Richard Nixon, and the country took a very different path than it might have. But things spiral around. We stand now at another threshold in history. There is a health revolution brewing in this country. A groundswell of awareness is surfacing, and people are feeling the change before they can articulate it. We know there is something terribly broken about the industrial food, medical, and pharmaceutical systems, but most people don't know what it is. It's no wonder because, as we've discovered, there is an intricate political and corporate apparatus in place to keep us from finding out. How soon will this become public knowledge? More and more people are joining the movement. How soon will it be important enough for us to take action? As Renee Miller walked us back up the burning asphalt road from her family's graveyard, past the boxes of putrefying animal corpses, she told us, "I'm taking a risk by talking to you because I feel I can make a difference. If nobody don't stand with you, you stand by yourself. There's a risk that something could happen to me, but I don't think like that." "What do you think like?" I asked her. She smiled her radiant, beautiful smile and turned to me. "I think I'm going to be all right. I'm doing it for my family. It's not all about me. I'm doing it for the whole community because we all are related. Everybody way down this block know Renee. Some of them looks at me funny, but I hold my head up because I believe in this. Where there's a will, there is a way. And I believe that. Maybe I can't figure it out, but somebody can. You might can figure it out. You go tell people. Somebody going to make a difference." We are not content with things as they are. Let us change our lives so we may love them the more. Things spiral around, and this is the time. Thank you.